Ahead of the 2024 federal budget, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau just announced a new Renters Bill of Rights and some ideas that they have for renters when it comes to renting here in Canada. I'm Mike Ouzas, I'm a realtor here in Toronto. If you ever want to book in a call with me to discuss what's been happening on the ground level in Toronto real estate, click on that first link in the description down below. The new Renters Bill of Rights was announced by Justin Trudeau ahead of the new budget coming out in 2024. And while it sounds like it could make a difference for when it comes to renters in Canada, and I'm going to discuss specifically in Toronto for this video, anytime there's a budget or a pending election coming up, housing is at the forefront when it comes to any of these discussions. And this is where all the parties have their own ideas when it comes to making housing more affordable and accessible to everybody. Here's the federal government's promising Renter Bill of Rights and upcoming budget, and this is on CBC News, and basically every news article has covered this in the last week or so. And they're introducing new measures specifically geared toward younger people who are renting more than previous generations. And Trudeau goes on to say it's about changing the rules of the game in a way that meets young people where they are. Ottawa will work with provinces and territories to develop a Renters Bill of Rights that would introduce a national standard lease agreement and implement requirements for landlords to disclose an apartment's pricing history to allow tenants to negotiate their rent. The new measures will also include a $15 million fund for provincial legal aid organizations that help tenants fight against rent evictions and landlord abuse. And the last proposal is that they want to change federal rules so that making rental payments on time will count towards someone's credit score, something Trudeau said is meant to help renters looking to one day buy a house. He did go on to give an example to mention if you look at someone who pays $2,000 per month mortgage, they're getting recognition and credit for that from their bank as part of their credit score. But if you're paying $2,000 a month in rent, you get no kudos. And Chrystia Freeland was in BC on Wednesday to announce the slew of measures aimed at helping renters and those who want to purchase their first home one day, saying that younger Canadians' frustration is understandable and they will launch a no-holds-barred plan to wrestle down the cost of owning and renting a home. Let's break down those four proposed ideas. And the first one is that they want to create a Canadian national lease agreement that is Canada-wide between landlords and tenants when it comes to creating a tenancy agreement. Interestingly enough, the Liberal government in Ontario created a Ontario Standard Lease Agreement back in 2018. Kathleen Wynne was a premier in Ontario back in 2018, and she created this new Ontario Standard Lease Agreement. And this is the form that we use today. In Ontario, we do have the Ontario Real Estate Association's Agreement to Lease form, and those are what an offer is made from a tenant to a landlord when they're trying to rent a property on MLS. The realtor would prepare those forms. It would be signed by the tenants and then submitted to the landlord and the landlord's agent for review. Even though we do have the Ontario Real Estate Association's Agreement to Lease documents, we still need to create another agreement on the Ontario Standard Lease forms. And this sometimes creates some confusion, as if I'm working with either landlords or tenants, they may ask, why do we need to sign another document? If the Canadian government comes in and creates a third Canadian standard lease, now we will have three agreements that need to be signed by both landlords and tenants. This would definitely make things even more confusing, as essentially you're trying to put on all the same clauses and all the same details into all agreements so that they all coincide together and have the same details on all three. I don't believe that this will really change much for when it comes to renters. And in Ontario, again, as mentioned, we already have a standard lease. Next up will be the landlords having to show the previous history when it comes to the price that they were receiving on the last rental agreement. Now, while this, I guess, sounds good and dandy, I don't think it's going to make any difference whatsoever. As a realtor, I can look up the history of a property if it was previously listed on MLS and know exactly what it rented for the last time around. But that being said, with the demand in the rental market, with a vacancy rate of around 1.5% according to CMHC last month, I don't believe that showing a previous rental rate will help tenants negotiate down a price. If, for example, that property was rented back in 2015 for $1,500, that was almost 10 years ago. And now the current rate for a one-bedroom condo in downtown Toronto is in and around $2,500. I don't know if the landlord will be too apt to accept an offer at around $2,000 a month like Trudeau was mentioning if there are 4 or 5 offers on the property at the same time. This is what we typically see for desired units in the city of Toronto, especially as we head into peak seasons like in the summer months. Third on the list for the Tenant Bill of Rights is the ability for tenants to get credit for their credit scores once they pay rent each month. And I do actually really like this idea idea. And if you have any experience with this, drop a comment down below. I do believe that if tenants are paying the rent each month, they should get credit for it and it should be reflected in their credit scores. That being said, I also think it should go the other way, where if a tenant is not paying on time every month, then their credit would be affected negatively. This could also help some of the issues that we are seeing at the landlord-tenant board with non-paying rent and some of the backlogs that we've been seeing. As if a tenant knows that it will affect their credit, maybe it will help to alleviate some of the backlog at the landlord and tenant board. With all that, I'm not sure exactly how the landlords will actually report the credit scores to the credit bureaus and if it will be on them to do every single month or one time a year. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to play out. I'm not even sure if they've figured out how that's going to play out. Those are the three keys on top of that $15 million fund when it comes to the Renters Bill of Rights. Even though it's proposed as a national program, one thing to keep in mind anytime the federal government comes out and mentions anything about housing is that housing is provincial and municipal. Even since that announcement, we have heard the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, and the Premier in Quebec speak out against the Bill of Rights. This article mentions that Premier Ford rejects Ottawa's Bill of Rights and protection funds for tenants, and Doug Ford is along with the Quebec government in rejecting Ottawa's attempt to help renters. And Ford described it as a form of creeping into jurisdictional matters by the federal government, and Ottawa will need the provinces and territories to sign off on the proposed plan. I'm not sure if any of these Bill of Rights will actually come into play. And if you recall back to 2021-2022 election campaign for the federal government, the Liberals also announced a home buyer's Bill of Rights, and none of those even came into play. This is right here on the liberal.ca website, and here are the home buyer's Bill of Rights that the federal government was looking to introduce. Banning blind bidding, we know that that did not happen across Canada. Establishing a legal right to a home inspection also has not happened across Canada. Ensuring total transparency on the history of recent house sale prices on title searches. Requiring real estate agents to disclose to all participants in a transaction when they're involved in both sides of a potential sale. Moving forward with publicly accessible beneficial ownership registry. Mortgage deferrals for up to 6 months in the event of job loss or other major life event. And requiring mortgage lenders to act in your best interest so that you're fully informed of the full range of choices at your disposal, including the first-time home buyer incentive. There you have it. Those are the Renters Bill of Rights that is proposed for the new budget coming into play, which is released on April 15th, 2024 for the country of Canada. Even though I do think that this might be a step in the right direction of addressing a Renters Bill of Rights, I'm not sure if the ideas proposed will really make a difference when it comes to helping Canadians rent in major city centers across Canada, such as Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and some of the other more prominent cities in the country. When we look at things like helping Canadians get into home ownership, even though the credit scores will help to build the credit to qualify for a mortgage or even a loan, for example, there are other elements when it comes to affording a property in Canada, such as having the down payment readily available and being able to qualify for a mortgage of the property that you're looking to purchase. That's where, if we think of things like maybe less land transfer tax for first-time home buyers, even though there is a rebate, that rebate is not enough to cover that initial first property. And most importantly, building more housing stocks so that buyers and renters will have more choice when it comes to making that move into home ownership should they choose, or even finding a better price on a rental as more rentals come to market. We just saw that here in downtown Toronto, where 9 buildings were completed for occupancy back in November, and it really helped bring the pricing down, at least as those properties are still in the process of getting absorbed at the moment. Love to hear your ideas in the comments down below on how to make properties more affordable for renters and for buyers for that matter. I'm Ouzas. Thanks for watching.